Hello. This evening I would like to talk to you about effective note-taking for great books seminars using basic principles as enunciated in Mortimer Adler's and Charles Van Doren's book, How to Read a Book, whether it be for great books of Western civilization, reading something like Herodotus, or whether it be for something like Sacred Books of the East, reading something like the Bhagavad Gita. These are two seminars that I'm currently reading, and some of my participants have asked me for further clarification on the basic sort of best note-taking habits, because what we're doing in seminars like this is, for many of us, for the first time in our lives, or the first time in a long time, really trying to engage very seriously with challenging, dense books that are meant to instruct us and to leave us really thinking more deeply and knowing more rather than just getting more content or reading an exciting story when we're done with them. So in order to get the most out of any seminar like this, whether it's in a continuing lifelong adult education seminar of the type that I lead, or whether it's in your first go at it in college, if you're at a good college like Columbia, where you have the literary lit-hum or CC courses to go through as seminars. How can you and should you best take notes? What are the different stages that you might want to consider and go through when getting the most out of a book like Herodotus' Histories or the Bhagavad Gita? The first stage in taking notes, I would say, has to be in the books themselves. That is, when you do your first full, thorough reading of the text. That's what Adler and Van Doren call the full inspectional reading. The first time you try to really go through the text of a book like this without anybody else's aid, on your own, reading through it, seeing what it says, making as most sense of it as you can, knowing that this is not the first and only time you're going to read it, but this is the first but not the only time that you are going to read it. You need to do this with a good old-fashioned pencil in your hand, and you need to, I know this sounds like heresy to bibliophiles. It's not something you should do with a library book or any book that's not your own, but if it is your own book, you need to truly make it your own, as when you're reading through it, you mark it up. You use a pencil, ideally one, something you can erase and not, really mark up the page immemorably, but something that you can go through and underline what's significant and circle key terms and develop a system as you go along of stars or other sort of exclamation points for important things, brackets on the side, and use the margins at the top and the bottom to write your annotations, your notes, what you see as you see it. So you start reading, and when you get more experience, you'll develop a system. You might have a special notation that means a key term, or a special notation that means a statement of purpose, or a statement of intent, or a universal statement applicable beyond this specific context, or a person, an important person who keeps returning. So you might develop some notation for that. But in your initial read-through, it doesn't hurt to simply use that space in the margins to jot down your thoughts. Say what you're seeing as you see it, note it down. So, again, this is something that makes a hard copy of a book your own permanently, and enables you to reread it with greater facility, because you'll have made the notes and you'll have underlined the key terms and the key thoughts that you'll have seen on your own as you first went through it. So the first stage is that. Read through the book on your full inspectional read with a pencil in hand, underlining, circling, making annotations, different sort of special markers to indicate different types of things that you're seeing. Once you've done that, any book like this you don't read it like a novel and just sit down and turn the pages and go through it. You need to go through it several times. So once you've done that, you've marked up your copy of a book. You should then go back and look at the different sections. In Herodotus, we have what are called books. There are 9 books. In the Bhagavad Gita, we have like 19 different chapters, but in each chapter you have different sections. You have different things here. So you want to go off and mark off the sections and then revise it, maybe reread it in entirety, maybe go through your notes, but somehow go through it. And this is utterly critical. The first step in taking notes on a separate piece of paper before you write anything down would be to go through what you've just read by section and do that very critical, what the late Dr. Gary North, the Ron Paul homeschooling curriculum, may he rest in peace, taught my sons and a whole bunch of generations of people. It's called lecturing to the wall. Van Doren and Adler talk about similar things here. It's been out there. It's a basic concept. When you read something, it's so easy for us to sit there silently, read silently, and just think to ourselves, yeah, I get it. Well, the real test of that is, can you teach it to somebody else? Can you really articulate what you just read? We'll call this, in Dr. North's terms, lecturing to the wall. After you reread a section, stop and say aloud, summarize aloud what you just read. If you think that you understand something, but you can't say it, that means you did not understand it. Only when you can articulate do you have a ghost of a chance of saying, yes, I understand. Maybe you didn't understand. Maybe you misunderstood. But if you can't say what you think you understood, you did not understand it. So the second stage, after marking up the book, is to go back and look at the different sections that you can now mark off. And for each section, reread it or summarize your notes by looking at the markings you made and articulate what you just read. If you can articulate it, then you need, the next stage is to write that down. And ideally, this should be done, I would say, good old-fashioned form, on loose leaf paper to be put in a binder so that you can move the pages around as you see fit. The detail and degree to which you write things down, I can't give a general rule or law for that. You might want to write it in great detail in full form. You might want to do it in point form. You might want to say, I'm going to limit myself to a certain number of words or pages to summarize things, because ideally this loose leaf binder that you're going to be developing from reading a number of books like this is going to be something that's going to grow over time, and you might want to get some sort of systematic degree of uniformity of length and content and the like. So the important thing is that you be able to articulate, summarize the key points, the main ideas of what it is that you just read in each section, in some way, shape, or form, to some degree of detail, ideally developing a uniformity over time. You write that down and you put that in a loose leaf binder. That's a basic overall concept for each section of the book. The next section, also on loose leaf paper, that I would highly recommend anybody who's interested in engaging in a project like this go through, is again, go back to the text that you have now marked up and look at those annotations you put in the margins. Look at the the key terms that you underlined or highlighted, the main ideas that you wrote out, and develop a list of these things, a number of lists. So you're definitely going to have, going back to Adler and Van Doren, in any book like this, we need to come to terms with the author. That means understanding the terms, the vocabulary they use, the key ideas, the key words. There's so many words that we use in everyday speech that can mean different things in specific contexts. So you're going to have highlighted the main ideas. Maybe there'll be new ideas like dharma or karma. Maybe there'll be ideas like liberty or calamity or something. But key ideas, words that come up time and time again that an author is using to really make a point. Ideally, you would want to highlight these and ultimately make a list of these. And I think make sort of your own little mini dictionary of it for these. So make a list and give the definition as you see it being used. And then you're going to add to this and rewrite it, do it multiple times. Ultimately, maybe when you're done with this book and go on to the next one, you're not going to be adding any more. You want to take it and alphabetize it, so it's easy to go through and find when you look through this again. So coming to ideas, coming to terms with the key terms. A book like a history, more important than a religious book, well, that too. Key people. Who are they? Who are the main people? There's so many people that we meet, so many names that are thrown at you when you pick up any book like this, but then you read through it intentionally and you realize, well, this person came and went, but this person comes back and time again. This person stays for a long time. This is a key person. In a couple of months, when I've moved on to another book, am I going to remember who this person was? Probably not. So I ought to write down who this person was, what their relationship to other people are, and that kind of thing. And this too, likewise, make sort of a list. Okay, this person is so-and-so, related to so-and-so, and appears in what book, what chapter. Make a list so you can track down things like this in the future. Also, in coming to terms with an author, an anonymous author, a spiritual author, a known author, looking to see what are they trying to prove. So you should have made notes in the margins about, again, statements of purpose, statements of intention, universal statements. Books like this are full of things that sort of apply to all people, really quotable things. You might want to write these out in full. You might want to indicate where they come from. But again, make a list of these things and indicate that these are the main ideas. These are the key thoughts that are coming through from this author, and get this in sort of a list-like, a chart-like form. So having gone through and marked up the text in itself, underlining, highlighting, circling, putting things in the margins, extracted from that which are the different sections of each book, of each section, of each part, of each chapter, articulated that aloud to make sure that you can do that, perhaps erroneously, but at least to your own best understanding, your own contemporary understanding of what you've read, and then from what you've just articulated, putting that down in some degree of fullness, some form that you would be able to go back and make a summary of this section of each book, and then gone back and looked again and made a number of lists of key terms, that is key vocabulary and their meanings, key ideas, key people, key statements. Make a nice comprehensive list of things like this that you can then refer back to. And then I wouldn't say a final step, because there are more steps that could go into more and more detail depending on how much effort and time you wanted to put into it. But what I'm articulating this evening, I think, are 4 basic steps that anybody who wants to embark upon such a project must go into, and then you could do more if you like. But these 4 basic steps, I've gone through 3 now. Mark up the text, lecture to the wall, articulate, and then write it down, and then make lists. The 3rd step is make lists of the key ideas, key terms. And now the 4th step, which I haven't talked about yet, is something that you're going to do when you really go further in this project, is you want to open up a new section for comparing and contrasting with other texts that are in the same genre that you've read in a comparative context, that you've started to read as you work towards reading syntopically. Ultimately, you go beyond reading analytically towards reading syntopically. So in the great books of the East, in my seminars here, we have read the Quran, and now we're reading the Bhagavad Gita, and next we may read the Tao Te Ching or some Buddhist text or something. So when you have several texts that are talking about the same basic topic, we're reading Herodotus. You can see here, after Herodotus, we're going to read Thucydides. How are Herodotus and Thucydides similar? How are they different? So you want to make up, basically, you can start out with a simple chart. How are they same? How are they different? Compare and contrast. But looking at different ideas and keeping that open. So even before you go on and you read a secondary text, you can start to write some of the key ideas. But this really comes into play when you have one, or when you have more than one text to compare. And then as this goes further, if you go on and you read Herodotus and then Thucydides and then Tacitus, and as I just said, if you read multiple sacred texts of the East, this can become the most complex section of your note-taking. You can compare and contrast things that are most similar, all of them across the board, and in various ways. But this is a very individual project, but I think something that everybody who wants to engage in this is going to want to engage in some degree or another. So again, there could be a fifth, a sixth, many more stages of more detailed note-taking of what you hear in class or in the discussions, or what some of the interesting factoids or things like this, things that you want to remember. But as a basic set of fourfold things that you want to be doing when you're engaging in participating in a seminar where you're going to read multiple books. For each individual book, as you read it, mark it up, underline it, highlight it, take notes in the margins. Then go back, articulate what you said, make sure you're able to summarize each section. From your spoken summary, write down something that you can remember after time has gone by, however that suits you best, point form, paragraph form, as much detail as you like. Then you go and you make, from your notes and from that summary, a set of lists of key terms, key vocabulary, key people, key ideas, key statements, and then open up the possibility, the necessity of, when you start to read multiple books, how can you compare them? How can you contrast them? Works of history, sacred texts, works of literature. What's similar? What's different? Start to make categories and look for things that you can go back in the future when you revise your memory and look back at your notes that will help you to remember what it is that you read and why you read it, and most importantly, what you got out of it, how it enriched you, how it made your mind expand, how it made you see things beyond the horizons that you normally see things in. I hope this was useful and helpful to you, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening.